All right, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back. Welcome myself back. Was off the grid a little bit. Now we're gonna come back, as Hashem, with added vigor, energy, and refreshed spiritually, and take on the task. Now, the task that we're talking about. This is a new class that I would like to start giving with Hashem's help. I'll be able to see it through. This week is the week of the last week of the month of Nisan, which is the most auspicious time for the redemption. In 1991, in the April of 1991 in Nisan, um, there was a very high expectation for Moshiach to come, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the very was pointing to all the signs that the Geula is at the threshold, the redemption is at the threshold. And then in the last day, 28th day of Nisan, I guess the Rebbe sensed, I guess it's hard to know what was in his mind, but he expressed very strong, a very deep frustration and pain that we are not doing enough on our end. We're so close, we're so there, and yet we're kind of out of it. And we're not, he doesn't have the team he needs to push this through. So then the Rebbe says that we're not crying with sincerity, that we want Moshiach, we're doing it because he's saying so, and so on and so forth. And he says, what else can I do to bring, I've done everything I can. What else can I do? The only thing I can do is give it over to you, which means put the responsibility on you, which is not to be, God forbid, read as, okay, I'm done. I'm resigning. What is clear from the Rebbe, especially from watching the talks that came after that, until you don't have responsibility for it, you're not really going to take it seriously. It's like, children in a classroom when there's a kid misbehaving and you're having a hard time doing with him. One of the smartest things to do from a wise educator will put responsibility on this child to make him responsible for the behavior of the classroom. And I just take the very, very troublemaker, make him responsible, he or she responsible. And by getting responsibility, then you get serious because you feel you have an importance now. So the Rebbe was saying, till now, you guys all felt that the responsibility of bringing Mashiach was mine, and you're just onlookers, and you lend a hand here and there. You're not getting engaged. You're not investing yourself. You're not throwing yourself into it. Definitely not sacrificing your entire existence for this most important monumental task. So now I am putting the responsibility squarely on you, and now hopefully you'll take it seriously. Then that was the talk on the 28th of Nisan, briefly. We're coming to the anniversary of that in 2-3 days. Everybody was shooken to the core from that talk. And then after that, the Rebbe came back and continued for almost an entire year of giving talks. During those weeks, he expanded the Moshiach, the ideas of Moshiach, the understanding of Moshiach, explaining the concept of Geula redemption on the deepest levels in ways that we've never heard before. And he just intensified until it reached literally a boiling point. And then at the conclusion of that period of time, the Rebbe had a stroke, and then a second stroke 2 years later, exactly on the same day. And we are here 30 years later, pondering, scratching our heads, what's going on. And I think the answers are in where the Rebbe handed us the key. This is a new series. I'm calling it The Key to the Redemption. In our hands, he hands us the key to do it. And he gives us instructions by helping us and guiding us on how to do it. Problem, and now there's a lot of emphasis in many circles to study these talks, particularly from all the vast amount of teachings of Hasidus. There was so much to learn, yet this particular segment of talks was given a special name called Dvar Malchus, the word of a king. It was very powerful, even that the Rebbe allowed that. That was the name of these talks. He edited them, had them published during that time. Again, this is the last year we heard him speak. And they had, usually his talks were called Lekutei Sichas, or Sefer HaSicha. Sichas means talks. But here it's Dvar Malchus. Importance to these particular talks, especially since it is regarding it's applicable to our time individually. He's addressing the time we are in right now, meaning even though it's 30 years ago, nothing changed on the end. That if anything, we're closer, but we're there. It's just that for whatever reason, we haven't yet added that one straw that will break the camel's back. Now is the time to do so. So I feel like some of these talks are not as accessible to people because they're not really well translated into English. They've done a few, a couple of 2 years ago, Tut Alts, an organization dedicated to spreading Moshiach awareness and being inspired by this very talk of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe used these words, Tut Alts, do everything you can. Published a few of the talks in a very booklets and did a phenomenal job. But a lot of them have not, most of these talks are not yet been translated in a very learnable, digestible way. And even if they're translated, it's translated without commentary. So for most people who haven't learned Chassidus, who don't have a good understanding of Chassidus, it's hard because this is the deepest stuff, the deepest teachings. The Rebbe kind of summarizes all of Chassidus in this 1 year of talks. It's very, very, very advanced stuff. And as a result, but on the other hand, it's simple. It's simple and advanced. It means, but you have to be able to learn it. Thank God I've been teaching it for a couple of years, but more in Hebrew, weekly. For a while, I gave a few classes on it. We have them online as a series, Dvar Malchus. And I think it needs to be taken as a task to actually go through it week by week. Well, it's too long weekly to do it in one class. Would require at least 3 classes a week to cover it. So, being that this is the first week, even though this year it's Chavches Nisan, 28th of Nisan is going to be on Thursday, comes out this week in the midst of Tazria Metzorah, but the year that the Rebbe gave that thundering, earth-shattering talk, it was earlier. And Tazria Metzorah was the second Shabbos after that shocking talk. And this is the first week kind of where the Rebbe really addresses what it is when he says it's our responsibility, what it is to do, and how can we do it. So without further ado, we're going to begin learning, and Hashem should give me the strength and the determination and the consistency to be able to see this through, to go through it every week. So here we are. These will be more morning classes, meaning by most of you probably afternoon, and I'll try to go through it. We begin with Tazria Metzorah. I'm not going to read it inside, but I am going to be following the talk, the sikha, because I'm trying to stick as much as I can to what the Rebbe said, maybe here and there to add, and I will try to be very clear that this is my own addition based on what I am seeing over here. But I'll try to stick very much to what is being said, not literal translation, but the concepts, just to stick to the actual way the Rebbe said it. So here we are, and I'm also going to keep these classes to less than an hour so that they're digestible. So here we begin. So the Rebbe begins the talk as follows, in continuation to what has been spoken earlier and emphasized in the latter time. Latter time mamash, he means, and he points on the bottom in the footnote to the sikha of the 28th of Sivan, regarding the need that of the actions of every single person to do whatever they can to bring Moshiach Tzidkeinu. In other words, that it's no more the business of the leader; it's the business of all the people. Every single person needs to chime in and take this seriously. It's our business. A person can, do whatever they want, but in terms of your divine responsibility, what God expects of you, it's your responsibility to now take it seriously, that you should know that it's our, mine, yours, and each and every one of us to do whatever we can to actualize the redemption, to make it happen in the literal sense, and not to start scratching our heads that we're going to do it and one day we'll get it done, but we have to do whatever with an urgency that we have to get it done now because we have to bring Mashiach immediately now. Now the Rebbe gives an explanation why it's now upon everybody. Why is it upon everybody? What's the urgency right now? He says, because, it continues, time right now, and he's standing now in the beginning of the month of Iyar. This was the 6th day of Iyar when the Rebbe said this, almost a week after the month of Nisan. So we just completed the month of Nisan, and literally in this times, and he emphasizes when, at the conclusion of the month of Nisan, of this past year, which was the year 5751. By the way, this is again my addition. That's when we crossed over midday of Friday in Hebrew, in the Jewish calendar, in the Jewish. There's a system where we count 1,000 years as considered a day. So, because the world is 5,783 years old, So we count from day one as to the year 1000 and so on and so forth. From the year 5000, we reached Friday. When we say Friday, we reached Thursday night, because Thursday night is the beginning of Friday, because in Hebrew, in the Jewish calendar, night goes first and then goes day. 500 years was night, 500 years is day. 5750, we crossed over midday, Friday. That is the time for Mashiach. After you go into the second half, the latter half of the day of Friday, that's when you welcome the Shabbos, which is the time of Mashiach. So therefore, the Rebbe is saying, and all the other reasons that only he knows, which I don't know, he doesn't explain over here, but he does say, literally right now, we completed all the end times. And therefore, because we completed literally, there's no more end times. We've completed already all the end times in the literal sense. And therefore, Mashiach is now, definitely can come in right now, any moment. And every person can, so much so that we can point with our finger and say, here he is. Knows he's ready. So again, let me try to give what I understand the Rebbe to be saying over here, is that there are certain, in history, there were certain, there are certain rules and regulations that God set up which are time that needs to pass in order for the Mashiach to come. And then it wouldn't be dependent on us. If the time has not come yet, quite on the contrary, it says, don't push the redemption when the time has not come. And there were many times given by the sages when the time for Mashiach is, and there's discussions already why there are so many different times. They're called kitzim. Kitzim means end times. But the Rebbe says, and therefore during those times, you can't say it's your responsibility to bring it, because if there is something inherently blocking that is divine, that is something related to God, then we can't do it. And maybe if we can do it, we would need the biggest tzaddikim, the most righteous people, to be able to break a barrier that God has set up. But in our case, the Rebbe says all barriers are done. There's nothing there anymore. Now it just needs to be triggered. It needs to happen. I guess God is waiting for us to do something. So we need to do something to make it happen, but there's no essential blockage anymore. And if that's the case, so how can you sit by idly and just, be busy with anything else when the world is suffering, the world is in pain, darkness is in pain, God is in pain. So yes, and that's as well true, because God is with us in all our suffering. There is this, and how can we be so cold-blooded and just sit there and watch this happen? So now is the time that the Rebbe says to everybody, but we have to know that it's not just going to happen. It's our responsibility to do something. Doesn't mean that every person in the world is going to do something, but there has to be some action that's going to do. We don't know exactly how many actions need to, but everybody has to take this and make this their personal thing. And again, because now is the time when Moshiach can walk through the door, literally, because there is nothing holding him back anymore. Being that that's the case, he says, so now we need to explain the emphasis of the redemption and the emphasis of everybody's pa'ula, everybody's actions regarding doing Mashiach. But when we're going to explain it, the Rebbe says, I'm going to connect it to the time that we're in right now. This is what the Rebbe is going to do in the entire following year. He's going to show you how in every single day opens up new opportunities based on the quality of the day and the quality of the moment, the time, the Torah portion that we're studying, which gives us unique windows of opportunity and unique inspiration and unique possibilities for us to do what needs to be done. And he's going to develop it throughout almost an entire year. So he begins the first week. He says, let's take a look at what we're studying this week, unique to this week, and let's attach it. Because the main point is we have to become consumed completely with this work of bringing Moshiach. And when you're consumed with something, then everything you see relates to that which you're consumed. Okay, if you're into a certain business and you're into something, you see that everywhere and in everything. And every person you meet, you see an opportunity for that. So in every moment of time, we have to see the unique opportunity. What can I do right now based on the quality of the time? Because as the year passes, we go through time, each moment has unique qualities. So, he says, we're going to have to explore what is the unique ability now to bring Mashiach based on what we're studying in Torah, which in Torah we're studying, the Rebbe says, two main primary things which are related to this time. Number one, the Torah portion of the week, which this week is Tazria Metzorah. It's a double portion. This year it's also that way. It's a double portion. In addition to that, we start reading the ethics of the fathers, Pirkei Avos. because the after Pesach until either till Shavuos, some communities or other communities until Rosh Hashanah, throughout the entire summer, every week we read another chapter of the Ethics of the Fathers. So we have to find the Moshiach connection, not just a nice thought, but as a inspiration and as a guidance of what we can do and needs to be done to make Moshiach happen, bring the Geula in the redemption in the literal sense. Okay, and that's in the Torah part regarding, and in addition to that, regarding the general time that we're in, which is the month, because in addition to the Torah, we're in a certain time period. So what does the month mean? The time which we're in, which is the month, and in regarding to the count of the Omer, because every day we're also counting the Omer. So that also, the fact that we're counting the Omer and every day has a special spiritual quality. So from that as well, we need to understand and connect what is the what does that give us? What does that add to the mix, so to speak, to energize and infuse us and instruct us on what needs to be done? Okay, so we begin in chapter 2. He says with the parsha of the week. The parsha of the week is a double Torah portion. He says this parsha, the Rebbe says, has Moshiach written all over it. It's so obvious you don't even have to go further than just the name. The name of the first Torah portion is Tazria, which Tazria means to conceive and give birth. And the Torah opens up with the instruction of what happens at childbirth. And primarily it's instructing on the impurity that affects the mother. When the mother gives birth to a child, she's in a state of ritual impurity, which primarily affected her inability, her forbidden. She was forbidden during that time to walk in, to go into the temple and to eat any consecrated meats, anything holy. And it's a certain period of time. But it opens up with, and it differentiates between if she gives birth to a boy or if she gives birth to a girl. The opening verse says a woman who conceives and gives birth to a boy. And the name of the Torah portion is Tazria, which literally means she conceives. So that name itself, he says, is speaking, its entire, is already shouting the redemption. Why? Because exile is considered a pregnancy. We find it in many times in scripture, in Navi, that like there's a verse in Isaiah 66, verse number 8. It says, Yolda Tzion Espanel, that Zion, Tzion, has given birth to her children as a prophecy regarding the redemption. A woman is, why? Because redemption is a birthing, something incredible good, a great godliness comes to the world. Not only that, as we're going to see, he's going to explain, the exile is the pregnancy, because exile is not just suffering. Exile has to always be seen in the context of that the exile is a painful experience leading up to something really great. And that's all suffering and darkness in the world is all leading up to a greatness. It's the concept that we said earlier. Night comes before day. The night is the preparation of darkness, pain, suffering, hardship, and it's all a preparation for a great birth, for a great light, which is the day. So the pregnancy represents the exile state, and the birth is the redemption. So when the name of the parsha is giving birth, so what should that spark in our minds? It's referring to the redemption, the actual redemption happening. But it can be many redemptions. Anytime there's any problem and we get out of that problem, it's a redemption. We get out of COVID, it's already a redemption, right? So any kind of situation, how do we know which redemption we're talking about? So the fact that it says she will give birth to a boy speaks volumes. Why? The sages say that there are all the redemptions in the world that are not the final redemption are called female redemption. And the reason is because just like a woman who gives birth and becomes pregnant again, so too, which means that even after there is a redemption, it doesn't last because she goes into pain and into sorrow, into pregnancy again. That's why those redemptions are all female. The song that we responded to the redemption are always called Shira. It's a female song. Like we sang when we went out of Egypt, we sang a Shira. Az Yashir Moshe sang of Bnei Yisrael together with the Jewish people as a Shira Hazos. Both words, Shira and Zos, are both feminine. So it's a song, but it's not the ultimate redemption. The birthing of a girl represents a relief, a redemption, but not necessarily the redemption that we're waiting for. The birth of a boy is indicative of the ultimate redemption, a powerful redemption that will bring the world into its ultimate utopian state for everlasting, for all of eternity. And that's the meaning of the birth of a boy. More specifically, the boy himself that's being born, that is Moshiach himself. That's the Redeemer. He is the boy, which he brings from the book of the Orach Chaim, one of the great Kabbalistic commentators on the Chumash, in which he says, on this verse, a woman will give birth to a boy, is referring to the birth of Mashiach's neshama, the soul of Mashiach, that's coming from the masculine world, from a very, very, very high place. And that is this birth that we're talking about. So when one moment we speak about Tazria, we all shout out Mazel Tov. Thank God Moshiach is born. In the words of the Rebbe, the birth, the V'yolda Zachar, the birth of Roimes, this is indicating, this is hinting to, on the birth of the and he's born as a baby, but that would mean he still got to wait, because as he's a little baby, it's going to take him a while till he grows older. He can bring the redemption. No, the birth of Mashiach means, birthing means when something comes from a concealed state to a revealed state. A baby is not created at the moment of birth. The baby, the fetus, is there, but it's there as in a concealed state. It's a fetus, not a child, not a person, not a full-fledged human being. Revealed when the baby, the fetus comes out. That's the revelation of the person. So we say birth over here, in referring to Mashiach, we mean Mashiach reveals himself. How? Because we know that, based on what the Rebbe says in other places, Mashiach Tzidkenu is a human being who lives in this world. The Messiah, Mashiach, is a human being living in this world, who's a great tzaddik, he's a very righteous person, who himself doesn't know that he's Mashiach until the time of the redemption comes, and then God opens up his own soul to his ultimate potential. In other words, within him is revealed the soul of Mashiach, and suddenly he's imbued with an incredible spirit of God like no other human being has. Like it says in Isaiah, V'nacha Allah, that descends upon him, this incredible spirit. In other words, Mashiach's awakening as Mashiach, which what we always refer to as the Hisgalos. When will there be that moment when, first of all, Mashiach becomes revealed to himself, but then not long after that, he reveals his power and his ability for the entire world? And that is what Tazria means, the birth of the soul of Mashiach. More specifically, he says, the verse over here, Isha ki Tazria, a woman giving birth, means it's not just, let's not put the focus only on the birth of Mashiach, but we're also focusing on the process. Because Isha, the woman who's giving birth, who's the woman? The woman, because Mashiach, so here's a very deep and very important idea. And that is that, okay, just checking the time. That is that Moshiach is, Mashiach doesn't come out of the woodwork out of nowhere. Mashiach is the culmination of all the work of holiness and goodness throughout all of history. Every single action of goodness done by any human being, where a person, usually holiness means transcending yourself and doing something beyond yourself for the betterment of the bigger collective good. That's the idea of goodness, especially if you're doing something specifically that God instructed us to do, which is Torah and mitzvah. And for the Gentiles, it's the 7 Noahide laws, and doing acts of kindness and charity and so on and so forth. All these things together, accumulation of it, brings God into the world. Moshiach's neshama is a soul that contains within it it was created, so to speak, by all the goodness that we have done. And then that soul takes all this power that's within the world and reveals it, makes it all happen, brings it to fruition, to its openness. So the words Isha ki Tazria, Isha is referring to the Jewish people as a whole, the collective soul of Israel. Tazria is not really the birth yet. Yolda means the birth. Tazria means to conceive. So usually, like in every pregnancy, first there is conception. 9 months later, there is birth. So spiritually, what does that mean? It means that the collective Israel does the work of Tazria, which is conceiving. Now, what is conceiving? Conceiving is also related, the word Tazria is also related to the word of Zorea, which means to plant. And it's literally the same thing. Just like when we plant, what do? We put a seed into the ground, and by putting a seed into the ground, eventually you're going to get a tree, a beautiful tree full of fruits. But right now you don't see it. All you're doing is putting a seed in the ground. But without putting the seed in the ground, nothing will grow. Same as also the conception of a human being comes through an intimacy where a seed is planted. And that seed is planted, and at that moment nothing happens. Well, 9 months later, the child will be born. So we're talking about the time of exile, and the time of exile is the time throughout all of history in which the collective are planting seeds of the divine, seeds of godliness into the world, so that eventually there will be this enormous explosion of godly light, which is Moshiach. So in the verse, we don't just have the actual grand finale, we have the whole story. But the Rebbe over here saying a very interesting thing, that the situation can be, even though we know that it was thousands of years already that we planted, but since we're holding now at the last seconds already, we've done all the work, and maybe we need one last seed to be planted by referring to each and every one of us. We're going to do one last mitzvah. We're going to do one last action. So we should realize that the planting of the seed right now is going to create Viyolda, because in the verse it says, Tazria, she conceives Viyolda. It's not like Tazria, she conceives and everybody goes to sleep for 9 months and we wake up and then there is the birth. When you're reading it, when the person reading it in shul, the Balkori reading it from the Torah, or any of us reading it from scripture, we will read it like this: a woman who conceives and gives birth, which means the birth comes immediately, because that's where we're holding in the history right now, that without any interruption will bring about the final redemption right now. And that's the way we have to feel every second. We have to be living at the edge with this consciousness that it's ready to happen at this moment. And what is born? What is born is the ultimate child, the ultimate revelation, which is Moshiach. Okay, so that's pretty obvious that the name of the Torah portion, Tazria, is an inspiration about birthing Mashiach into the world, bringing about what is most important right now, the revelation of Mashiach. How about the next Torah portion? As I mentioned earlier, it's a double Torah portion this week. The next one is called Metzorah. Is a leper. A leper, someone who has a form of leprosy, which is not the illness of leprosy that we know, but a spiritual, which was a physical discoloration of a person's body, which was an indication of a spiritual illness, which was physically painful as well. But the form of healing it, which made the person, deemed the person ritually impure, and the way of healing it was not through natural means of calling a doctor. Instead, you called a priest on certain conduct, and the person had to obviously do a lot of repentance and live in isolation and quarantine, so on and so forth, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month, for a year, for 10 years, till they get their act together and they're able to be re-invited again to live among society. This was the laws of the Metzorah. So and this person who was inflicted with this illness was called the Metzorah, a terrible situation. Now, when you read this, you go, oy gewalt. You're not thinking Mashiach, you're not thinking redemption, you're thinking tsaris, you're thinking problems. It seems to be trouble, it's darkness, it's pain, it's impurity, it's illness, it's disease. But lo and behold, the Rebbe, no. The Rebbe looks deeper. And the Rebbe says, well, we take a look in tractate Masechta Sanhedrin. In Masechta Sanhedrin, on page 98, on the second side of the page, the Talmud asks, what is the name of Mashiach? And the Talmud gives various different possibilities for what Mashiach's name is. And the Talmud says that Mashiach's name is the white one, Chivra de Bei Rebbe. He's the white one from Rebbe's house. One of his names. That the Gemara, there's a name Tzemach, there's a name Shiloh, there's a name Chizkio, I think. There's a whole bunch of different names. There's a name Menachem, Shiloh, Yanai, Chizkiah. These are 4 names. And then it says one of the names for Mashiach is Chivra de Rebbe. He is the white one. Rashi explains the white one means he's suffering. He's considered a leper because even though he doesn't have physical leprosy, but because he's wounded and afflicted with a lot of pain. One of the things it says about Mashiach is before the time of the redemption, he suffers pain like no other human being because he's suffering the pain of the world. He has a huge soul, which is attached to every soul in the world, in the planet. And as a result of that, everybody's pain is his pain. And more than that, God's pain is his pain. So we can't imagine the suffering of him. That's why he's called Chivra de Bei Rebbe. The Gemara why is he called Bei Rebbe? Because he's from the house of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Rabbeinu HaKadosh was the author of the Mishnah, who was a descendant from the Davidic he was of the Davidic dynasty. He's a descendant of King David, which means he qualified to be Mashiach. So actually, when he was alive, the people thought that he was Mashiach. Rebbe, the author of the Mishnah himself, was Mashiach, and he himself had a very hard life and suffered enormous amount of pain. So Chivra de Bei Rebbe means the white one from the house of Rebbe. Where it says regarding Mashiach, Achen chaleinu hu nasa, it says he carries our illness, umachavenu, and our pains and our aches, savlam, he is tolerating, and was referring, v'anachnu chashvenu nagua, and we thought of him that he is an inflicted being, mukalakim, beaten by God, and in other words, we did not appreciate who he is and what he is, and he's suffering enormous amount for the pain of the world. Okay, my simone, what is a simon? And then the Gemara says more. How can you identify him? The Gemara says he sits amongst the poor people that are ill, the homeless people sitting inflicted with wounds. The Gemara says even where? By the gates of Rome. Now, let's understand all this. This is all not necessarily in the physical sense that you can go next to the gates of Rome, you'll find a homeless encampment. The gates of Rome destroyed the temple. So the gates of Rome represent the general idea of exile. And when it says, the Rebbe is going to explain it later in the Sikha, it means a tzaddik, a certain righteous individual who lives amongst his brethren in the exile and lives with enormous sensitivity and pain of their pains, in addition to his own pain that he suffers. Okay. So right away, what do we find out over here? That Moshiach is called Metzorah. That's one of the names of Moshiach. He's the white one. White means a leper. Wow. So Tazria means the birthing of Moshiach, and Metzorah means is Mashiach's name. So we're talking about Moshiach himself. Now, to make that a little stronger, the Rebbe says, what does the portion of Metzorah start with? Zos tia Torah sa Metzorah. This will be the rulings, the teachings of the Metzorah, biyom taharaso, in the day of his purification. So that's already good news. The Metzorah himself is not such happy news, because Metzorah is referring to Mashiach, the Messiah, Mashiach. But Mashiach, when he is during the time of exile, when is Mashiach suffering? Mashiach is suffering during the time of exile. Once he reveals, is given the ability, gives the green signal, gives the thumbs up from God to go ahead and do what he needs to do and redeem the entire world. Quite on the contrary, everything is transformed to the greatest pleasure, delight, and ecstasy and bliss that we can't imagine. But during the time of exile, during the pregnancy, during that period, Mashiach is in enormous pain. But the Torah portion of Metzorah, even though the name of the parsha is Metzorah, but the actual content is, if you read the verse, it says, this shall be the law of the Metzorah, of this inflicted, of the leper, biyom taharaso, on the day of his purification. So in addition to its regular meaning, referring to every leper needing his own rehabilitation, and when he finally is healed, there needs to be a certain process in order to enable him to come live amongst everybody else. He needed certain sacrifice and go through certain ritualistic experiences in the time of the temple. But spiritually, this is also referring to the greatest inflicted being, which is Moshiach, on the day of his purification, is referring to the day that Moshiach is healed, which means the day that Moshiach ends the exile and comes, same idea like Tazria, which is the birth of Mashiach, which means Mashiach being revealed. The same is also Metzorah, the day of his purification, means the day that he comes out of his affliction and out of his suffering. Now, in the footnote, he brings that it's not only referring to Moshiach, footnote 24, he says it's also referring to the Holy Temple. Because we know later in the Torah portion, it talks not only about people inflicted with leprosy, but a house that's inflicted with leprosy. A leprosy shows up on the walls of someone's home, on the stones of someone's house. So the Midrash tells us an amazing thing, that that's referring to the Holy Temple during the time of its destruction. See, temples of God don't get destroyed. They can't be destroyed. They're divine homes. The destruction is only on the outside. Internally, they're there, but they're in a state of infliction. They're suffering. They're in pain. So the temple is broken. It's hurt. And when it says this should be the day, the story of it later, it says, actually the Midrash says that when a leprosy shows, when a infliction, when a nega, one of these signs of leprosy on a house, which, by the way, you see, it's completely unnatural. The discoloring of stones. So what you needed to do was, first they had to take out certain stones, do like a little bit of a demolition, only of the particular part of the house, but if it still didn't, and then if it comes back again, you have to demolish the entire building. But the way the Midrash says is that you knock out some of the stones is referring to the demolition out of the entire building. The demolition of knocking out the house is referring to the destruction of both temples. So then the Midrash says, you would think it's forever. So then it says, in the verse it says, no, you should take new stones and then put them back in and then rebuild. It's referring to the reconstruction of the third temple. So we see both regarding Mashiach and regarding the house of God, which come together. Mashiach will lead the world back to its ultimate connection to Hashem, which will be manifested and facilitated through the holy third temple, waiting to be rebuilt in Jerusalem any second with God's help. So both of these are referring to the day of the exile ending and the redemption, and the time of the redemption has arrived. Okay, so right away, see, the Rebbe didn't take too long till he can find the connection of both Torah portions to the urgency of where we're standing right now at the time when we need to make it happen. We're holding by the birth and we're holding by the healing moment. So now what do we do? Okay, so in order to understand that, we have to first ask a couple of questions. So in chapter 3, this particular talk had 14 chapters. So we'll try to go through 4 of them today. So in order to understand this, what is the deeper meaning and what is its significance and what is its main thing is not how inspiring this is, but what does this say to me and to you in terms of action? What can we do and what should we do? Let's first get the instructions based on the deeper understanding, open our eyes and see what the Torah says. So number one, he says we need to understand the connection of these two Torah portions and the order in which they are stated. Tazria and Metzorah. The Rebbe asks this very, very powerful question, but so simple, but so powerful. He says Tazria means birth. Whose birth? Mashiach's birth, which means which is, we spoke earlier, Moshiach being given the power to reveal himself, which means the exile come to an end already. If that's the case, how in the world after we finish Tazria do we come to the portion of Metzorah? Metzorah means the infliction of Mashiach during the time of exile. Again, the name Metzorah is not referring to Mashiach after the redemption. It's referring to the Mashiach during the time of the suffering. So it would make sense the other way around. If you had the first Torah portion, Metzorah, which is introducing Mashiach to us in the earlier stages during the hard times. And then afterwards, and finally, there is a birth. And once there is a birth, everything is great. So now it's over already. Now we can celebrate. We can pop the champagne. But here we're popping the champagne bottles already. In Tazria, Mazel Tov, the baby is born, Mashiach is here, everybody's going bonkers, right? And the shofar is blowing, we're already marching to Jerusalem, and suddenly we're hit with the Torah portion, Metzorah, which is how do we fall back after Tazria? How do we fall back into Metzorah, which is the time of pain and suffering? Oh, I'm sorry, that was the second question. The first question was, how do you even connect the two? In other words, they seem to be two situations that are so opposite. Tazria is the greatest joy, and Metzorah is the greatest pain. So how do you even connect? No, the question is like this. As I mentioned, it's two Torah portions. If it's two Torah portions, usually two Torah portions are read in 2 different weeks. These two Torah portions are sometimes connected, which You can't do that with all Torah portions. You never do that with Bereshis and Noach, for instance, or with Shemos and Ve'era, or with Vayikra and Tzav. I'm just giving examples of Torah portions that are unconnectable. Tazria and Metzorah is 2 Torah portions. Some years they're read individually, but most years they're combined. Now, if their themes and their energies are so opposite, how can you combine them? Tazria means the joy of the redemption, and Metzorah means the pain of the exile. How do you connect the two? Number 2, the order, if you are connecting them, the order should have been the opposite. First Metzorah, the suffering, and then the jubilation and the joy of the redemption. Now, the third question, regarding each one of these Torah portions itself, we got to ask the question. The title usually of a book or of a paper or whatever it is, or of a class, should usually match the content. Some people use deceptive advertising. They want you to listen to the class, and they put out words, and it's not correct. I dislike that, and we shouldn't do that. You want someone to listen, then find the content that they're interested in. Actually, call it that. This class we're calling "The Key to Redemption" is in our hands, because that's what we're talking about. How all this information. But the name of something should always be true to what it is that you're naming. So the portion of Tazria, the Rebbe says, the first Torah portion, Tazria, actually, even though it talks about birth, the birth is actually only the first 6 verses, 6 or 7 verses, maybe less, 5, 6 verses. The rest of the entire portion of Tazria talks about the infliction of the leper. That when the Kohen, the priest, comes to examine the leper and decide that he's impure. That's Tazria. So Tazria is a very negative Torah portion in the sense that it's talking about a disease. Versus the next Torah portion, the portion of Metzorah, even its name is Metzorah, which Metzorah means the leper, which, as we said before, is referring to darkness, pain, suffering. And yet, the entire Torah portion is not about leprosy. It's about the healing when the leper came out of his leprosy, and he's at the time of healing. So it seems over here that the names have been kind of misplaced. It would have been far more appropriate for the first Torah portion, which is Tazria, which is all about the illness and the symptoms of the illness, should be named with the name of the illness. So the first Torah portion should be called Metzorah. The second Torah portion, which is talking about the redemption and the healing, should be called Tazria, the birth, because the birth goes hand in hand with the healing. Over here, which seems to have, by mistake, we confuse the names. Each one has got the name of the other one. That's a good question, a powerful question. It would have been appropriate for the first Torah portion to be called Metzorah, and the second Torah portion to be called Tazria, because that's dealing with the healing process, which is the birth. Now, obviously, the superficial answer is going to be, it doesn't say the word Tazria, and next you can't call it Tazria, and you can't call the first Torah portion Metzorah because it doesn't really say that over there. And usually, if we name something, we pick one of the first words of the Torah portion and name it by that. But that's a superficial answer. That's not deep. You're just calling it randomly because you found the word. It's because the name is always true to its essence. It's Torah. It's infinite wisdom of God. It has to be perfect. So how do we work that out? Okay. Now, fourth question, the last of the questions, regarding Moshiach himself. We ask, what is the name of Moshiach in the Talmud? And one of the answers we give is that Moshiach is called the leper, the white one. Again, because the sign of leprosy in the Torah is a white spot. So he's called the white one, which is indicating his suffering. And the Rebbe says it doesn't make any sense. Why? Indeed, the Moshiach suffers. But is that his name? Is that what he's all about? It's a sorrowful, pitiful state that he must go through. But is that really his essence? Let's take a look at the other names the Torah gives. The Rebbe doesn't say this, but I'm just adding this. Let's take a look at the other names the Torah gives for Moshiach. Moshiach is called Menachem. Menachem means the comforter. That makes sense. What is his essence? He comforts all of existence. He comforts the world. Another name, he's called Shiloh. Shiloh means a gift to him. Comes from 2 words, Shiloh, a gift to him. He's referring to the appreciation of all the nations of the world to Moshiach. the world will finally have a leader. Take a look at the world now. We're realizing that there's no leadership in the world at all. Everybody. I mean, anybody that ever thought that there would be anybody who can help the world now, who's the leader? It's ridiculous how crazy we're in, what kind of situation we're in, how messed up everything around us is. There's no leader. Finally, when the real leader will get up, there will be such a sigh of relief, and everybody will be so excited, and everybody will come bringing him presents. That's the meaning of Shiloh. Well, that makes sense. Or the other name of his name, Chizkiyo. Chizkiyo means strength with godly strength. He'll be an enormous, strong person that he can elevate and rally all of humanity into its ultimate state of goodness. Yinon, I think, means shining, or it means royalty. These are names that make sense for him. But the Kol Moshiach leprosy, and that is his name, that's his condition before he's realized who he is, before he actualizes his power, his real strength. Good question. No. To understand all of this, okay, we have to go a few more minutes. Let's do chapter 4. He says, but we need to get a better understanding on the situation of leprosy, of this illness. Again, we're not talking about the leprosy that you'll look up in Wikipedia or on some medical journal. We're talking about a special kind of leprosy that doesn't exist today, which was a spiritual form of an illness. Okay. So simply when you read the story, you read it and you take it to heart, we can be very, 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 very overwhelmed by the severity of the disease and of the horror of it. We're talking about a illness that is first of all, that it was enormous pain, and it creates on the person the greatest level of impurity. So much so that we don't allow this individual to live amongst normal people. They have to be excommunicated. They live outside of this. They can't even walk into the city. In any walled city of Jerusalem, any walled city in Israel, they weren't allowed to come into. And they couldn't go to any parties or any family celebrations. They weren't even allowed to, I think, be. Truth is, I think it's only during a certain period of time. Anyways, they're living in complete a sequestered state, separated. They have to dress in a way, and anybody wants to come talk to them, they have to notify them, I am impure. It's horrible. They're condemned to live in a very, very dark state, in a very difficult state. It's a very, very terrible situation. So we would think, oh man, this person must have done who knows what, and they must be such a horrible human being. And almost to the point that we're giving up in despair for the well-being of this individual. That they are kind of almost like beyond repair. Only it will take a miracle for something to happen. The Rebbe says, which by the way, this is so amazingly comforting to us. As we're going to see, as we're going to learn in tomorrow's class, the day after, this is the most comforting teaching, because we'll see in a moment. And regarding the condition of the world, which is, by the way, in today's days in a state of this leprosy, where almost some people feel so sick by what's going on, and we realize that it's not something to get despaired about, but to realize, quite on the contrary, it's very good news. But let's see why. In the opening verse, when it introduces leprosy, in the first Torah portion, Tazria, I remember we said earlier in the first Torah portion, it talks about leprosy. It begins with the verse, Adam ki yeh ba'or b'sarai, a man who's going to have in the skin of his flesh a discoloring, a negatzaras, and that he has to be brought to the priest. Now, the opening word is Adam. Now, Adam means a human, but we know that when the Torah refers to human, most of the times it doesn't use the word Adam. Most of the times it uses the word Ish. Ish is the most common term. Ish mi beis Yisrael. Every man from Israel, or so on and so forth. There are some times when it mentions the word Adam, for example, when you're offering a sacrifice. Adam ki yakar, when a person is offering a sacrifice. So, and also Adam was called Adam, but most of the times it's called Anashim, Ish, and so forth. There are 4 names in which people can be called: Gever, Ish, Enosh, and Adam. 4 Hebrew words. Now the Torah labels a person with different names because they represent various different levels. When a human being is on a lower level, they have one name. On a higher level, Adam is the highest, most compliment, the greatest compliment you can give someone is call him an Adam. It's like people say you call someone he's a mensch. In this case, Adam is the ultimate mensch. Someone who is in a very high caliber level is called an Adam. I understand by sacrifices, A person who's coming close to God, he's coming to the Holy Temple, he's already elevated to a high stature. But when it comes to a person who's suffering this defilement, to the point that we have to kick him out of the camp, and he has to be excommunicated, and so a person like this, why aren't you calling him Adam? He seems to have been, and the sages actually tell us all kinds of sins. He's done a lot of sins. He has arrogance, and he speaks, and he gossips, and other types of things, and he's haughty, and sometimes for anger or for speaking, giving out what is it called, false. What is it called, or whatever? When a person makes a false accusation against someone else, like serious stuff. So this might be terrible. In that case, this person should barely be called a human, and if anything, give him the lower name. You're giving him the most prestige name for a human being, Adam. So the Alter Rebbe, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, picks up on this, and the Alter Rebbe says like this: most people didn't get a nega. This particular disease didn't happen to your average Joe Schmo on the street. They were only great people who would get these tsaras. This illness, it was a very big compliment to get such an illness. The reason for that is because you had to be on a very high level to receive it. Why? And that's why, by the way, the Alter Rebbe explains, that's why he says today it's not common. The reason is because we don't have people that are on that level, besides Moshiach. But more than that, people are not on that level, so we don't get that disease. What in the world? Why would a disease like this, why would a person on a high level get a disease? So the Alter Rebbe says, take a look at the words. It says, Ki ba'or b'sarei, it was in the skin of his flesh, which indicates that the disease is skin deep. What does that mean? From the time the world was created, there was a mixture of good and bad, since not the time the world was created. From the time that Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, they brought about a confusion and a mixture of good and bad. That means that deeply embedded inside every human being is evil. And we have to cleanse ourselves and purge ourselves. And that's the work that we all have to do in our lifetime. We have negative tendencies. We have urges, desires, wants, selfish motives, sometimes very, very dark stuff. And we have to work these things out. And that's our work. It's a lifetime of work to work on these things. Now, most of us are stuck with, even after a lot of work, we still have deep flaws inside our psyche that we haven't cleaned yet. We haven't yet worked on. We didn't. Right? It's a lot of work, whatever it is. The person who becomes a leper is a human being who is eradicated all negativity from their inner self, from their deep inner psyche. At the deep places, they're pure. They're the purest heart, the purest mind. They're full of good desires and good wants. Their entire being is filled with light and with goodness. The person that has really, really worked hard on his or herself. However, they still have a little outside, what we call aesthetics to take care of. On the most outside level of their being, there's still a little polishing that is needed. And a person like that, and in order to alert them, and they might not be aware of it, because it's so minor, it's so external. That's the main point of it. It's superficial and it's external, because they've cleansed it all out from their inside. But on the most outer aspect of their being, there's still a little bit of darkness, something that's still not yet, they didn't, and they're not paying attention to it. So in order for God to alert them to it, it would show up, it would become discolored, their skin. The fact that it was only the skin that became discolored is indication that the negativity is only on the skin level. That's the idea. And that's why this is a person who's Adam. Now you say such a severe punishment? Yeah, because they're not finishing it. And now they can take care of it very quickly. If they do tshuva immediately, if they right away take it to heart and fix whatever they need to fix, it would go away instantly. If they're whatever reason negligent, in other words, they're so caught up in their own perfection and they're not willing to make that last change or whatever is necessary because they think it's okay, they'll be stuck with it until they fix it, because God wants them to reach a state of complete perfection. That's the concept of a nega. It's someone that's almost finished, got a little bit more, needs an extra inspiration, an extra push to make that last effort. Sometimes people have good intentions and good desires, and they have certain relationships, but they've gotten accustomed that in a certain way they belittle someone in a very unknown way, even to themselves. They're belittling a certain individual, that their own child, their own person, their own brother, their own sibling. They're nicest. It's not like they're not. They're nice to every person. They're kind. They work, but they've gotten kind of like, because they're just not paying attention, don't realize that there's doing something that is lacking in sensitivity to a certain human being, and they're hurting this person, and maybe they're hurting them, and the person who's getting hurt doesn't even realize they're getting hurt because they've been so hurt already in the past, not even realizing it. So they're taking it, and this person is doing it and doesn't realize it. But God, who is super sensitive and to perfection, realizes that and says, "Hey, that last I know you've worked on yourself a lot, but there is something still there that you're just a little uncareful. You need to clean that." And that's where the nega comes from. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. Now, to make it more, emphasize it even more, the Rebbe himself adds on the Alter Rebbe, on his great-grandfather's commentary. And he says, if you take a look at every word in the verse, it's trying to indicate how minor it is. Number one, it says, Ba'or Bisari, that the disease is only in his skin. So what does that mean? It's not in his bones. The bones represent in Hebrew, bones are called atzamos, which atzamos means essence. It's from the word essence. It's the inner being, the essence, the essential structure of the person. It's not on the spine. It's not even in your ribs. It's not even on the flesh. Flesh is more external. Bones remain with you all the time. Flesh is constantly changing through the food we eat and the like. So flesh is more external. That this person is clean even on the level of flesh. Constant state of doing this sin. Yeah, means it could happen. Even let's I give an example of this person that does something not nice to someone. Let's say the majority of the time they don't do it, but sometimes they get so forgetful, they get so involved with something that they're a little bit lacking in sensitivity to their spouse. A tiny bit, or the most external. It only happens. Maybe it happens only once a year, or maybe once in 10 years, but it's still there as a possibility. That's the key here. And then he says even more than that. Nega. Nega means an affliction, but nega also means it comes from the word it touches. It's not like they're really do this. They brush with this little bit of evil. Wow. So showing how external this is. We're going to add something tomorrow, but we're going to leave it. I don't want to take more time, leaving it to finish over here. That there is another element over here, and that is that the nega itself is a very high element, as we're going to see Be'ezrat Hashem. So stay tuned. We're going to continue, hopefully go through this, and we'll just let this be the last thing necessary for us just to study this, to be able to shine away the darkness. Thank you.